All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is the November event for San Jose State's SAA student group. I'm Katrina Williams. I'm the vice chair. And tonight we have Angel Diaz joining us from the SEMA archive at UC Santa Barbara. Let me bring this up. So again, welcome everyone. This is our second speaker event for this year. And the archive that we're learning about tonight is the California Ethnic and Multicultural Archives. Just a reminder of some Zoom etiquette. To preserve bandwidth, please mute your mic, turn off your video. Go ahead and ask any questions in the chat. We will get to question and answers at the end of the presentation. And this is being recorded. The recording will be posted to our YouTube channel. So tonight we're going to hear about the California Ethnic and Multicultural Archives. This is a special research collection at UC Santa Barbara that documents the lives of African Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, Chicanos, Latinos, and Native Americans in California. The purpose of the archive is to enhance research across disciplines for the University of California and to represent the cultural, artistic, ethnic, gender, and racial diversity that characterizes the state's population. And joining us to speak about this archive is Angel Diaz. She is the curator for SEMA. She's worked as the university archivist at Penn State and as a processing archivist for UCLA Special Collections. She's a founding member of the Los Angeles Archivist Collective, which sounds like a great organization that just helps archivists learn more about their career and their craft and make connections throughout Los Angeles. She has served in various capacities within SAA and SEA, most recently as chair of the SAA 2022 nominating committee and as a steering committee member of SAA's College and University Archives section. So everybody, please welcome Angel Diaz.
Hi, everybody. Before I go into my presentation, which is like share screen and slides, I just wanted to take a little moment to show my face to you all. And I was hoping because so I got my MLS at UCLA, which was in person, and I understand San Jose State is remote. So I'm hoping everyone can, if you're able to, in the chat, share with me where you are currently geographically, and if you happen to have an internship, have a part-time job, have a full-time job, where you work. So for example, I would say UCSB library, Santa Barbara. If you could just put that in the chat, I would love to know where you all are at. I'm kind of, my approach to this presentation today is like a tour, a virtual tour. So I'm hoping that, like when we give tours, you see people and you kind of engage with people. So I'm hoping to learn a little bit about you all, and it sounds like you guys are all over California. Some folks a lot closer, Paso Robles, an area that I enjoy. Henderson, Nevada, cool. San Jose, we work at San Jose Public Library. Davis, familiar. Rockland, cool. West Hollywood, very awesome. I'm in Japan at the moment. Very awesome. I don't know what time it is there. Hopefully not too early. Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, noon. Wonderful. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys. Thank you all for sharing about yourselves. Let me get started with my actual slideshow here. So again, I'm going to be talking about SEMA. And so what SEMA stands for is the California Ethnic and Multicultural Archives. And it's actually a part of special research collections at UCSB Library. I like to ground these kinds of presentations in a little bit about myself, mainly because I understand you all are students. And the question I had when I was a student was like, how did you get here? So I was born and raised in San Diego. I'm in Encinitas, which is North County, San Diego. I come from, my parents are Mexican American. They both work in, my dad's a landscaper and my mom works at an orchid greenhouse. So a lot of green thumbs in my family. Family is very important to me, and I have a large family in San Diego and in Los Angeles. I did my undergraduate degree. I got my undergraduate degree from the University of San Francisco. I also got a master's in teaching, and I lived in San Francisco for some time. I was a middle and high school humanities teacher, so I taught English and history in Oakland. For about 5 years before I decided to go back to school to get my MLIS. I went to UCLA. When I did my undergraduate degree, it was in history. I actually had an internship at the California Historical Society, but I didn't really know, like even then as an undergraduate, I didn't really know what archives, like that you could be an archivist. I thought these were just like historians that had this job. So when I finally did learn a little bit more about it, I decided to go back to school. And so then I lived in Los Angeles for some time. And what's not represented here was my like 3 years at Penn State University. No need to go back there. I actually love the job, but Central Pennsylvania is just not for me. And then in the center, you have my 13-month-old son, Teo. Okay, so that's me. That's who I am, very briefly. So now let's talk about SEMA. SEMA was founded in 1988. SEMA's collections of primary research materials document the lives and activities of 4 ethnic groups with strong focus on their social and cultural history, including literature and the arts. And so it documents 4 main ethnic groups in California, and that would be the Chicano Latinos, Asian Pacific Island Americans, African Americans, and Native Americans. There is a strong focus on literature and the arts, and just because of my predecessor, who was sort of the founding archivist for SEMA, based on his background and interest, the largest number of collections we have are Mexican American Chicano collections. They make up about a little bit over half of our collections. So SEMA's roots are very much connected to the civil rights protests of the late 1960s. In California, which saw much of the Chicano movement of the late 1960s and early 1970s take place, we've seen a steady increase in its population, so that now over 50% of the state's population is made up of cultural minority groups, and which are largely Latinos. But historically, few California institutions were systematically acquiring the papers and archives of minority communities. In 1969, all across the state, all across the UCs, all across the country and all across the UCs, Black students and Chicano Mexican American students carried out protests and demands for ethnic studies departments, and included in those demands are for ethnic studies departments was the need for research centers and corresponding libraries and resources to support learning. In response to that, UCSB developed a Chicano studies collection within the library, and that collection came to be known as the Colección Tloque Nahuatl, and is a comprehensive Chicano studies book and secondary source collection that was part of the university library, and is actually one of the first of its kind in the US. It's like a Chicano studies collection within the main library. Student protests would continue throughout the 70s and 80s. In the late 80s in particular, there was more action that similarly demanded that the university put an end to, and this is a quote, institutional racism and increase ethnic diversity on campus. So this is like the same kind of demand that we continue to see today. And it was out of this time that my predecessor, Salvador Guerreña, who was the former head of the Chicano Studies Library, began to develop CIMA as a center for primary sources that document the social and political movements of these four ethnic groups. CIMA has just over 200 collections, and they are the most heavily used in special collections. In particular, CIMA is one of the nation's largest repositories for Chicano and Latino visual art, especially our historic graphic prints produced in the various Chicano communities across the state, including San Francisco, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and San Diego. So, like I said, CIMA is actually part of Department of Special Research Collections. It was previously its own department, but as the library kind of developed and grew, it was brought into special collections. So I just wanted to quickly mention that our special collections department includes some other very strong focuses, plural of focus, that include the American Radio Archives. We specialize in sound archives, so we have a lot of wax cylinders, a lot of vinyl, a lot of old audio formats. We have an American Religions collection section. We have a growing moving image collection, rare books and printed materials, of course, Santa Barbara history collections, and university archives. As you all well know, the archive couldn't possibly digitize everything, but CIMA does have a fair amount of collections that have been digitized, and they're all of the paper-based materials that have been digitized are all on Calisphere. So some of you may be familiar with Calisphere, and you can look up UCSB Library, and we have a fair amount of our collections digitized up here. It's a great resource. We also have some video content available on the Internet Archive, and this is where I send researchers who are interested in the Teatro Campesino archives, Sojourner Kincaid Roll, and Califas. Okay, let me go back to... So, like I said, I'm sort of treating this like a tour, but I just wanted to show you what the library looks like. So what you're looking at on the top left is what turned out to be a fuzzy photo of the library. This is the newer end. There's kind of three parts to the library, and special collections is on this newer end. You can see below this photo our reading room, which is the way it is today because of COVID. We used to have many more tables in there, but we're a little bit more spread out. And you can see the windows that are shown above. We actually have 3 floors of stacks. The bottom floor, which you are seeing on the top right, is the most stacks. And that includes pretty much most of SEMA is on the left side, but there's all the other collecting areas as well. And then we also have kind of opposite to the reading room is what we call our seminar room, where we're able to have students come in for instruction sessions, but we also have, when we give tours, this is where we bring people in, and we can open it all up when we have events, and we can have lectures and all kinds of other things going on. So what I wanted to do was kind of go through some highlights of SEMA collections, and just kind of tell you a little bit more about these specific collections and the types of materials that are in those collections. And what I'm starting off with is a list of our earlier collections, but also some of our most requested collections. And so you can see here at the top is Self-Help Graphics and Arts, SEMA 3. That's, you know, early on in the numbering system. We have just over 200 collections. And it's really kind of interesting that like our first 10, 15 collections remain kind of the highlights of our collections. We have researchers from all over. So starting with our faculty at UCSB, we have a very strong Chicano studies department, and many of the faculty members do love to bring their students in for class sessions where they get to, you know, all of the people that they learn about in class, they get to come see some of their materials in the archives in the reading room. So that's one of our kind of audiences. We get a lot of academics and scholars from across the world, as well as a lot of interest from museums and curators who are doing research, because this is a lot of our collections have to do with the visual arts, performing arts. So it's a mixed bag, and it's kind of fun to get to field all of these requests. So yeah, let's talk about some of these collections. Self-Help Graphics and Art is a community arts organization based out of East LA, and they are in an organization that is still very, very active. If anyone is familiar with them, they just wrapped up their Dia de los Muertos season, their Day of the Dead activities, and they do a lot of work kind of around three main elements. So they were founded in 1970 and incorporated in 1973. So technically they're going to celebrate their 50-year anniversary next year. And they were founded by a radical nun and printmaker named Karen Bocalero, who actually studied alongside Corita Kent, who's also a pretty well-known nun and printmaker. But Self-Help Graphics was founded by Sister Karen, along with two queer Mexican artists, Carlos Bueno and Antonio Ibanez, and a number of other artists. And what their hope was to sort of create this place that could support artists that looked like them, that were Chicano, that were from the neighborhood, that were previously not as didn't have the exposure that other mainstream artists did, that white mainstream artists did. And so they hoped that Self-Help Graphics would support the development of young up-and-coming artists, while also being a center of cultural enrichment for the community that they were built out of, which was Boyle Heights and then East LA. So the work that they did was in three parts. They would have these community arts workshops where they invited community members, but also went out into local elementary schools to put on workshops, and they developed this thing called the Barrio Mobile Art Studio, which was I don't remember if it UPS or FedEx, I think UPS van that they took and they made into an art studio that could go out to people. And like I said, the Dia de los Muertos celebrations, which included a procession, a gallery exhibit, and other events. And now they do like a lot of workshops around papel picado, like school making and other art making where they invite families to come and take part. And then their professional printmaking program. And what we have is a lot of the prints that the artists produce while they're in residency at Self-Help Graphics. And I didn't share the photo of the rest of the flat files. There is over 1,000 prints in our collections that come from Self-Help Graphics. The ones that you have pictured here are from the artist Patsy Valdez from, I think, 1987. So this collection is one of our most used collections. The Royal Chicano Air Force Archives is, this was one of the early collections that came to us from an artistic collective based in Sacramento. And it was founded in 1969. I'm reading the bullets here, but they work to express the goals of the Chicano civil rights and labor organizing movement of the United Farm Workers. So this was a collective of artists that were producing a lot of artwork, but most of the artwork was activist in nature. And because of where they were located geographically, they were very connected to the work of the United Farm Workers. So a lot of the work that we have is very much related to the farm workers. And similar to Self-Help Graphics, their mission was to make available to the Chicano community a bilingual and bicultural arts center. Some of the founding members whose collections we also have, like individual papers, are Jose Montoya, Esteban Villa, and then Juanicio Orozco, Ricardo Favela, and Rudy Cuellar. RCAF was also responsible for making murals in the Sacramento area, posters, and many of these artists on their own had a lot of great contributions to the art world. And I will say that for both Self-Help Graphics and Royal Chicano Air Force, we have a lot of the artistic production that these groups made, but we also have their records. So it's a mix. One of the individuals that we have in one collection that is utilized and requested a lot is the Yolanda Lopez papers. Yolanda Lopez was a Chicana artist and activist. Her medium included painting, photography, and printmaking. She was born in San Diego, went to San Diego State, and got her MFA from UCSB. And much like many of the other artists that we have in our collections, a lot of her early work was from the early 70s, and a lot of her contemporaries are included in SEMA collections. She is well known for this series, the Guadalupe series, where she depicts herself wearing running shoes and the Virgin Mary's star pattern mantle. It's one of the most iconic artworks to emerge from the Chicano movement. And she went on to create other sort of similar iconic work that utilizes Mexican and indigenous iconography. And she was also a muralist early on, and very well known across the state in San Diego and San Francisco. She passed away just last year. Another kind of big organizational record collection that we have comes from the Comisión Femenil Mexicana Nacional. And again, a lot of their work was from the 1970s, based out of the Chicano movement of California. And this was a group organized by women who were very focused and were active in issues relating to women and families. And their mission was to enhance and promote the image of Chicana and Latina women in all levels of society. The organization as a whole, as a national organization, doesn't exist, but there are local chapters that are still active. I think one that is most active is in the San Fernando Valley. The records that we have are very often used because of the Comision's sort of relationship with many different women and women who went on to kind of produce their own work or become activists on their own right. And so people will access this collection, with a very specific focus on individuals. And we also recently digitized these records, and they're available via database scale primary sources. Another woman that I would like to highlight is Shifra Goldman. Her collection is a really interesting one, and it very similar to the Comisión is that people come to this collection because they're interested in maybe a specific artist or a specific thing that can be found within her records. Because Shifra Goldman was an art historian and an activist. She's originally from New York City, and she moved to LA and attended UCLA. And she pretty early on was interested in Latin American, Latino, Chicano art. And I do like this line. She was an activist for Latino art to deflect and correct the stereotypes, distortions, and Eurocentric misunderstandings that have plagued all serious approaches to Latino art history since the 50s. And she was very sort of comprehensive in her research, and it shows through her collection. The collection includes 392 boxes. There's audiovisual materials. There's slides that date from 1932 to 2011, so quite a large span of time. And her research files are pretty interesting because she collected. Her research files are very well organized, and she collected materials on like all kinds of folks that were Latino and Chicano artists, and so anyone doing research on, for example, say Yolanda Lopez could also cross-reference the Shifra Goldman papers, and they could look up Yolanda Lopez, they could look up Chicana artists, they could look up feminist artists, and she might have one thing on a person or many things, including correspondence with that person. So this is actually a pretty great resource for folks doing research. I wanted to talk a little bit about the not just instruction sessions, but different groups that come to visit. I already sort of mentioned that we have a Chicano Studies academic department on campus, and they do often come and use our materials, but we've also had interest from the English department, the history department, as well as K through 12 groups that have come in to just kind of look at the fact that we have collected and are documenting specific ethnic groups, and that we're here and we're available for anyone to come use our materials. And one kind of highlight of my year, we can say, is on the left side here in the center. These students are looking at different prints, and there's to the left of the table it's called the Nepantla Triptych by an artist named Irena Cervantes. And then what you don't see on towards the right side of the photo is another print by an artist named Esther Hernandez, and her work is called La Ofrenda. And a student, when she saw it, she was like, oh, because they had read about it. They had read a lot about the particular piece, and they had only seen it, on the computer online, but they got to see it in person. And that was very impactful for this particular student. And that's sometimes I'll admit, that I get a little kind of like, oh, why are we collecting so many like screen prints and like art? Like, what is the value of this when people can just look at this online? And just seeing the student kind of actually kind of like gasp was like, oh yeah, this is why we collect these things, so that people have the opportunity to see it in person. And that is a difference. That does make a difference. Yeah. I did want to share this with you. So this is something that I will present to students when the faculty member, has asked for kind of like an Archives 101 type of session with the materials. And I try to think about a way for students to engage with the archives, with the archival materials, rather than just me showing them and telling them about it. And it's very focused on art and artists because, as you can tell, those are sort of the highlights from our collections. But what I like to do is, so as you can see back here on the bottom right, all students have a folder in front of them. They're all looking at materials. They're invited to kind of piece through the folders. I usually only bring out collections that haven't been MPLP'd, which is, they actually say like box 12, folder 2, so that it's easier to put them back. And then, once they're looking through the folder and they find something that's particularly interesting, I ask them to kind of work through this set of questions. And, they're very basic, the 5 W's plus some questions like, what is this? What do you notice first? What people or objects are shown? Can you see any dates? Who made it? Why did they make it? And it's always different. Yolanda Lopez's papers have correspondence, includes journals. It includes just like things she collected that relate to her Guadalupe series. So there's a folder of just different images of the Virgin of Guadalupe. There's a folder related to like an exhibition she was a part of. So it's just like the flyers, the announcement, maybe correspondence with the curator. So all kinds of different things. And I want the students to kind of come to an understanding what it is they're looking at. So these are the questions that I ask them to work through as they're looking at these materials. And usually I'll walk around and sort of be like, ask them some of these questions. And I try to get some students to tell me more, and then we come back together as a group. And at that point, if a student has already talked to me, and we've had a little back and forth, they're usually a little more comfortable to share out with the class. But I will say it is very hard to get students to talk, especially after they've been on Zoom for a couple of years. But I guess I'm pretty lucky that this content is pretty visually interesting a lot of the time, so it's easier for them to kind of pick up on things to discuss. Let me see. Yep, that was it. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions. And I see that Katrina has asked a question. How much background knowledge did you have about this content before starting this job? That's a really good question, because as well, I don't know if you wanted to add to it. Okay.
Just you're so knowledgeable about it, and it's something I think a concern just going into sort of a new field at this point is if I haven't had a lot of experience with something or I haven't studied about something, would I still be able to manage an archive?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I did study, like that was part of my undergraduate studies, and that was an interest that I was in Mexican American Chicano history in the US, in California. I did work for some time when I was a student and then as a project archivist at UCLA's Chicano Studies Research Center. But then I went on to a number of other jobs for like 6 years that had nothing to do with this. And I really didn't know too much about the artistic side. So a lot of what I've learned on the job, and I've become pretty knowledgeable about these particular collections because they are the most popular ones. And so you're sort of forced to learn about the collections. But then you also get kind of lucky when you get researchers who come in and you talk to them and you hear from them what they're finding the most interesting. And I often take those gems with me, those pieces of knowledge with me. I will say that at Penn State, I was the university archivist, and Penn State is a large Big Ten football school, something that I knew very little about. And you just kind of pick it up. If you have sort of, I had previously processed faculty papers, so I had a little bit of knowledge, right? So some of the skills were able to transfer over, and I think that's helpful.
Thank you. If anybody wants to add a question in the chat or just unmute and ask directly.
I guess I'll say that one thing that oh, sorry, Mia, were you about to ask a question?
I was, but you can go ahead.
I highlighted, like I said, that large kind of the highlights of our collection are Chicano Mexican American collections. They do make up a little over 50% of SEMA collections, but we do have a very strong Asian American art and literary archival set of collections as well.
I was just going to ask if you could maybe give us a glimpse of like what a typical day looks like for you, or if it really varies, or kind of like what the how you interact with other areas of the library.
Yeah, that's a great question. As the curator for SEMA, I would say my day varies a lot. But it's always based around emailing, a lot of emailing. And special collections at UCSB is actually kind of a small operation, and I am pretty involved in a lot of aspects of sort of the archival cycle, right? I will talk with donors. I have a handful of donors that I'm in some process with. First there's one donor that I'm still sort of trying to get an understanding of what he has. I have another donor who recently emailed me like 6 separate emails of everything that she has, so I have to like work through it, and we'll plan to set up a Zoom meeting with her because she's in New Mexico, and so like we'll talk a little bit more about getting a better idea of what she has, and then I can decide, like, okay, I'll ask her to box it up and send it to me, and so then I have to facilitate that, or you know, it's funny coming out of the pandemic because I've done a couple of donor trips to go see what they have. So that's also a consideration. And then if something has come in, I have to support the accessioning of it, which would be like taking inventory of things. In our department, we use Jira and Confluence we use like Jira tickets to record all of the information about the collection, and that gets that is used for both accessioning into archive space and then finding a physical location for materials to live, and then it gets put in a queue for processing. I have a couple of student assistants that help me on some processing related work, and so I need to check in with them usually. And then on the other end, there's also researchers and people who will email me directly and ask me questions about collections or ask me questions about coming in. So I often help with that. And as far as working with colleagues within the department, there's a lot of collaboration. I'm working on a local community archives project with a couple of colleagues, and then across the library in general. I actually recently have been working most closely with the head of the digital libraries department because we have a lot of digitized materials that you saw in Calisphere, and we've been working to sort of clean up on our end digital files, locations of digital files, and then cleaning up some of our old web content. And that is usually means a lot of meetings. So yeah, hopefully that was
Yeah, thank
helpful.
you.
Yeah,
That really sounds like it varies a lot, but
it
yeah.
does. I see a question from Ali. What advice would you give someone who aspires to work in special collections? So you're already sort of taken the first step, which is you're in a MLIS program, and hopefully you are getting some practical experience. And I'm hesitant to ever tell anyone to volunteer or take internships if they're not paid. So hopefully you have opportunities available to you so you can have some sort of paid work. When I was a grad student, I had a couple of part-time jobs that I kind of pieced together. And what I found very useful is that you could get experience at all kinds of different places. And I did find it very rewarding to have different types of jobs, or having a job that had me doing different types of things. So not being too focused on just one track. For example, one of my jobs was digitizing audio for a little while, and that was super helpful. And then when I worked at the Chicano Studies Research Center at UCLA, that was just kind of straight processing. And at first I was not very excited about it because the collections were kind of boring, and it's sort of like, well, you're here, you're doing it, and you're getting experience. And then I even had a job where I was cataloging for a little while, and that I knew that wasn't something that I was that interested in doing, but it was really helpful for me to pick up that skill, but also it was kind of helped shape my understanding of the entire process. Kat says, thanks for mentioning the Asian American collections. Those were really interesting to me, and I love the idea of learning about the collections on the job. Do you have any networking tips that helped you get to work with these great collections? I think that, like I said, being open to taking kind of different types of jobs, especially being in Los Angeles for me, there are certain kind of places where, like, especially with my cohort that, you know, people would get jobs and you'd be like, oh, that's the place. Like, I want to work at the Clark. I want to work at the Getty. And I did apply for some jobs and didn't get them. So like I went to other places. And the thing is, our profession isn't that large. So even in a place like Los Angeles that have all kinds of places, everyone is sort of pretty involved. And so working anywhere or working someplace that's taking on different types of jobs at different types of places, I found helpful. However, many people also found it helpful to stay at one place. But like I said, getting a variety of skills is also important. Being in California, we have the Society of California Archivists, which I found to be good in the sense that it's small and sort of an easy entry point. There are some things about regional organizations that aren't as fun as it would be like with SAA. And I think another thing that I found kind of rewarding when I was able to, meaning that I had professional support for my jobs to attend different types of conferences, get involved with different types of organizations like DLF, the Digital Library Federation. No, I don't remember. But attending their annual meeting was really great for me. And I saw familiar faces there, but I also learned new things at DLF. And so not just sticking with, you know, SCA and SAA was super helpful.
See a couple more questions in the chat. What skills or qualities do you look for when hiring?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think that what's important when hiring is thinking about the position and the job, you know, the goals of the job. I think that's really important to start there. And so knowing that sort of determines the skills. So that's kind of probably not the answer you're looking to get, but I guess that's what I've already said, is like a little bit of a variety in the work that people do. You know, if you're working in special collections, it's, for me personally, I think someone who has a good understanding of like the entire work that goes into special collections. The thing about special collections is that we're our own little library, right? We don't circulate, but we could do cataloging. Some do digitizations. We do public services. We do reference. We do collection development. And so, you know, like if I was hiring a curator, or like we are hiring is a director of our department, we don't have a director right now, I want someone who maybe has some experience processing or experience accessioning. Historically, traditionally, special collections are led by more like curator rare books types who don't actually have an understanding of the technical services side. So yeah, someone who has like kind of a diverse skill set, or maybe someone who has particular skills in an area that we don't, you know, haven't been strong in. I also just think like once you get to the interview point, someone who is able to, who like you can see they can explain the work they've done and they're really interested in explaining the work they've done. I see Katie asked, how do you decide if a donor's collection is worth adding to SEMA? That's a really good question. I am not like I did say I have a number of donors that I'm working with right now, and I tend to really make the process super slow. I want to learn about the person a lot. I want to learn about the materials that they have. And often what I do, because it is hard to say no, often what I do is I really kind of like make decisions about the amount of things that they have. So that maybe they end up just donating like a 2-box collection, because what often happens is like people donate a lot of things and there's a lot of work that goes into kind of organizing or kind of working through the things that aren't related. But kind of to step back from that a lot is you need to have a collecting policy. You need to have a plan for what are the kinds of things you're looking for. SEMA has its strengths in visual and performing arts. So a lot of the people that come to us are in somewhat related to existing collections, and there's a clear connection. And so that's helpful. But I also am interested in growing other areas of SEMA. And so I've sort of decided, oh, it would be great to have maybe more materials related to low riding culture. And so that's an area. Someone who I just started talking to was telling me about how he collects some materials related to that. So I'm starting the conversations on that. Things that we don't collect are like the farm workers movement. We have materials from artists who worked with the farm workers, but like we don't collect historical documentation. That's just an example. It's easy for me to say no to that. There's a lot of great institutions that are collecting that, and I would direct you there, that kind of thing.
I was super interested to hear that you had the El Teatro Campesino archive.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that existed. That's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned digitizing a few times. Is that a big priority? Is it because it's such a visual and audio archive, or is it sort of a big push overall?
It was a priority. It was interesting. Like if you're familiar with Calisphere, it sort of came up in the like 2010, early 2010s. And SEMA was one of the first archives to really contribute to that. And there's a lot of content up there. And actually, Self-Help Graphics credits the fact that a lot of the collection was digitized and put online, and that allowed scholars and museum curators to find them. And what a representative from Self-Help Graphics told me was that because their stuff was up online, they were invited to be a part of the PST, the Getty's Pacific Standard Time exhibitions that happen annually. So it's really great for us to have things digitized. I will say that in order to digitize things, you do need to do a fair amount of maintenance. And for me, for the moment right now, my focus is on making sure that all the stuff that we have digitized now has proper metadata. And that's what I've been working with the librarian from the digital library to make sure that we have all of that in proper order, so that we can continue to maintain these things up as they are now. And then we'll continue to think about what to digitize next. I will say we recently did receive a grant to digitize more Self-Help Graphics, and it was digitized summer of 2021. We're just not quite sure where we're going to put things up just yet. Rachel asked, since you have a multicultural collection, do you need to present or archive the content in languages other than English? So the only language what I see sometimes is Spanish, and then also we've had I think a little bit of Chinese in the Iris Chang papers. And we haven't yet thought about how to, like, whether to do, you know, bilingual finding aids just yet. I'm fortunate that I do speak Spanish, so I can be helpful in that regard, but not with Chinese materials. So as of yet, like, that hasn't been kind of a need that's been expressed, but it is an interest.
Is there one more question before we wrap things up?
So I'm providing my emailer for you. I am a librarian. We're in service profession. So please, if you have any questions or anything lingering or down the line, I'm happy to help wherever I can.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, for answering questions, and for sharing such a great presentation. And thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for
So,
having me, everybody. Best of luck with your program.
thank you. Thank you for being here. And have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you, Angel.